Hello and welcome to Crossfire, the show that dives into the heart of global conflicts, where nations collide, alliances shift, and lives hang in the balance. On tonight's show, we tell you how Russia might now be left with no option other than a ceasefire in Ukraine, as it grapples to protect its influence in Syria. Also in the show, we tell you about Israel's new psychological warfare in Gaza by using haunting sounds to lure Palestinians into open areas, where they become targets. Stay tuned as we break down these critical developments and explore their impact on the future of global power and security. Vladimir Putin's influence in Syria is unraveling. Aleppo, a city once synonymous with Bashar al-Assad's resurgence in Syria, has fallen to an Islamist offensive. But the bigger threat looms just 40 miles away in Tartus, home to Russia's only naval base on the Mediterranean. It is a lifeline for Moscow's influence in Europe and North Africa. If Tartus falls, it's not just a military loss, it's a catastrophic blow to Russia's global ambitions. With Putin's forces already stretched thin by over 2 years of war in Ukraine, can he now fight on two fronts? Or will Tartus force him to make the unthinkable choice of a ceasefire in Ukraine? Our next report decodes this view.
What happens when a global power stretches itself too thin? Vladimir Putin faces the very question as his influence in Syria teeters on the brink. Aleppo, a city that once symbolized Bashar al-Assad's brutal resurgence, has fallen. The city has been taken by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, in a stunning November offensive. But this isn't just Assad's war anymore. You may ask why. Just 40 miles from the next target, in the city of Hama, lies the crown jewel of Moscow's influence in the Mediterranean, the Russian naval base at Tartus. It's Russia's only gateway to the Mediterranean, a lifeline for Moscow's ambitions in southern Europe, northern Africa, and beyond. Losing Tartus wouldn't just hurt Moscow, it could shatter Russia's strategic grip on the region. With Russian-backed Syrian forces reeling, the stakes have never been higher. And if Tartus falls, the ripple effects might force Putin into an unimaginable corner. Putin's already stretched thin by 33 months of grinding war in Ukraine. So, the big question now is, can the Russian strongman afford to fight on two fronts? Or could this push him towards the unthinkable? A ceasefire in Ukraine to save his foothold in Syria. On November 27, the HTS, an Islamist group with Turkish backing, launched a massive offensive in northern Syria. They took advantage of two critical factors: the Assad regime's weakened forces and Russia's preoccupation with its war in Ukraine. Their rapid advance south led to the liberation of Aleppo, a stunning blow to Bashar al-Assad and his Russian backers. And they're not stopping there. Hama is next. And if they take it, the entire Syrian coastline, Assad's last stronghold, could come under threat. Now that includes Tartus naval base. Russia knows what's at stake. Satellite images from December 3rd show every major warships stationed at Tartus have unmoored and moved into the Mediterranean. It's a clear sign that the Kremlin sees trouble coming. Now, if Tartus falls, it's not just a symbolic loss, it's a strategic disaster. Russia's coastal fleet, already struggling to stay afloat, would lose its refueling and resupply hub. And without access to the Mediterranean, Moscow's influence across the region would shrink dramatically. On top of that, Putin's military is already overstretched in Ukraine. If Assad's forces can't hold Tartus, Putin faces a gut-wrenching choice: double down in Syria and risk further setbacks in Ukraine, or agree peace in Ukraine to save Tartus and his influence in the Mediterranean. This isn't just about geopolitics. It's about survival of Putin's power, Assad's regime, and Russia's ability to act as a global player. So what will Putin do? Double down or pull back? One thing is clear. This is a gamble with enormous stakes, not just for Syria, but for the future of Russian power on the world stage.
The Russia-Ukraine war is well into its third year. The West seems to be rallying behind Ukraine with aid packages worth billions of dollars. But is their support as strong as it seems? With NATO's promises still a mirage and Ukraine's dream of membership of NATO stepping further away, is the West truly standing behind Ukraine? Or is it just keeping it at arm's length? Our next report decodes this for you.
US President Joe Biden has announced a $725 million weapons package for Ukraine. Italy and Germany have also pledged additional military support. UK PM Keir Starmer conceded that peace talks could end the Ukraine war. It seems that the Western world is truly rallying behind Ukraine. But the truth is far from it. Let's find out how. With the current leg of the Russia-Ukraine war in its third year, the Eastern European country has been receiving tremendous amounts of aid, and European Union institutions, including the EU Commission and Council. Till April 2024, the United States had given $175 billion worth of aid. It is the first time since President Harry Truman's post-World War II Marshall Plan that a European country has held the top spot as US aid recipient. While there are caveats within this, including the fact that only 106 of the 175 billion is direct aid to Ukraine, and the rest supports related US activities, the amount of aid in itself is huge. The US is also the biggest military aid provider to Ukraine. The EU and its 27 member nations have provided a total of $133 billion and pledged another $54 billion, taking their contribution up to over $168 billion. This includes military, financial, humanitarian, and refugee assistance. It also includes assistance for reconstruction in the future. Of the $168 billion, over $47 billion is military assistance. Germany, UK, and the Nordic countries have also made significant contributions. But let us not be enamored by the apparent large-heartedness indicated by these contributions. While by themselves considerable, they hide one big, probably the biggest shortcoming. Despite dangling NATO membership like a carrot in front of the war-beleaguered Ukraine, NATO chair and members have time and again proven that the promise is just that. A promise, a mirage, a finish line that grows farther away every passing day as the conflict escalates, with both sides now using increasingly advanced weaponry to attack and retaliate. Time and again, the Ukrainian president urges tangible progress on membership. And every time, NATO members turn around and announce more aid, sidestepping the membership question. While Ukraine earlier wanted to remain a neutral state, it changed its stance and started requesting NATO membership from the time it was first invaded by Russia in 2014. From 28% Ukrainians in support of joining NATO in 2012, public opinion shifted drastically by 2017, when 69% Ukrainians wanted to be a part of the alliance. In 2018, it added the goal of NATO membership in its constitution. The Russia-NATO rivalry is also not new. From the military blocs of the Second World War to Russia's betrayal theory regarding NATO in the early 90s, to allegations of Russia sabotaging communication cables in the Baltic Sea less than a month ago. The examples are endless. What matters more than the veracity of NATO's betrayal is that Russia thinks that it did. However, NATO nations are now reluctant to not only be directly involved and escalate the crisis further, but also to accept Ukraine into their fold and seriously risk antagonizing Russia. President Putin also highlighted that the principal ground for the February 2022 invasion was Ukraine's preliminary steps to joining NATO. What George Kennan, the architect of the containment policy towards erstwhile Soviet Union, said in 1997 about a NATO expansion expected to inflame Russian nationalistic, anti-Western and militaristic tendencies clearly holds true, even after over 2 decades. Looking at the Russia-Ukraine war from the lens of Russia's belief in NATO's betrayal, as well as Ukraine's, and its insistence on its own sphere of influence, it is plausible to argue that NATO's reluctance to admit Ukraine into its fold, despite Western aid contributions, is a betrayal of its promises of support to Ukraine. It is the red line that NATO is not willing to cross. But is it a signal to Russia for normalizing relations? The first direct conversation between the Russian president and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in mid-November definitely points in that direction. But for more, we will have to wait and watch. Bureau Report, India Today Global.
War is brutal, but in Gaza, it's taking an even darker turn. Reports reveal Israeli forces are using drones that are broadcasting haunting sounds to lure Palestinians into open areas, where they become targets. These drones aren't just weapons, they're psychological tools in a conflict already defined by unimaginable suffering. With thousands of lives lost and millions displaced, how far can war tactics go before they cross the line into atrocities? For more on this, listen to our next report.
In the chaos of war, survival often hinges on instinct. But what happens when those instincts, our deepest, most human urges, are turned against us? In Gaza, a horrifying tactic has emerged. Imagine hearing the cries of a baby, the screams of a woman, or a desperate plea for help in the dead of night. You rush outside, heart pounding, ready to save a life, only to realize it's a trap set by a drone. It's the grim reality unfolding in one of the most battered regions on earth. Reports from Gaza reveal that Israeli forces are deploying quadcopter drones armed with more than just weapons. These machines are broadcasting the sounds of crying babies, distressed women, and even threats, all designed to lure Palestinians out of their homes into open areas where they can be targeted. Human rights activists are sharing chilling stories of such incidents. In mid-April, reports of bizarre sounds like babies crying, women screaming began to surface from Gaza camp. Now these drones are far from ordinary. Remote-controlled, quadcopters have become a sinister tool of war in Gaza. Since hostilities escalated on October 7, these drones have been deployed for surveillance, targeting individuals and dispersing crowds, and the psychological impact is profound. Residents describe hearing recordings of children crying, sounds of "I want my mother," and chilling warnings in Hebrew and Arabic, declaring "you will die if you resist." But it doesn't stop there. Witnesses have reported drones opening fire on civilians during food distributions, playing sounds of tank movements, and even broadcasting local vendor calls to create confusion. All of this is happening against the backdrop of an unimaginable humanitarian crisis. Gaza's health ministry reports nearly 45,000 deaths. Millions are displaced. Hospitals, schools, and homes lie in ruins. Civilians are facing severe shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. Disease is spreading rapidly in overcrowded shelters, making survival itself a daily battle. As the world watches in horror, urgent questions remain unanswered. Is this a war on Hamas, or has it become a war on humanity itself? How far can psychological tactics go before they cross the line from strategy to atrocity?
That's what we have for you in this episode of Crossfire. You can catch us again tomorrow on India Today Global.